Yeah, please, yes.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Senate Institutions. It's Tuesday, April 2nd. Hope everybody had a great Easter. We're gonna start this week out, working on the capital bill, but as we like to do, we like to introduce the committee at the start of each week. So we'll start right over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wendy Harrison, Wyndham District. Irene Runner, Chittenden North, including Fairfax.
Brian Collins, Rutland District.
Linda Lehman, Committee Assistant.
Senator Russ Engel, Essex District. And again, welcome. We appreciate everybody who might be attending. We're gonna start the week out, even though I don't think the capital bill has officially passed.
No.
But we have enough of it to get a good start on it, and we're gonna start out today with Nicholas Kramer, and we have Kate Evelyn in the room as well. And Ms. Kramer, thank you. Good to see you. Welcome. What do you want to tell us?
All right, so for the record, Nick Kramer, from the Orange District, but I also Department of Finance and Management, and here today in that capacity. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for having me. Thank you, committee, for having me again. Always a pleasure to be back. So I think that the chair hit the nail on the head. The capital bill, I believe, is upstairs being debated, if not as we speak, fairly quickly this afternoon. So I have to start with the caveat that everything before you today is preliminary and based on the bill as it came out of the House Corrections and Institutions Committee. But what I thought I would do today at the chair's request is a quick overview. I think at a high level, obviously this committee will and can be hearing from other state entities, BGS, DOC, et cetera, in more detail on particular line items. But I really appreciate the opportunity, and the administration appreciates the opportunity to go through at a high level, line by line. I'm just going to focus on the changes from the governor's recommend based on the actions of your House counterparts. We've already spent, I think, some time going through the governor's recommend. So with that, I will launch into it. So I provided two different documents. I think in different ways, and all kinds of people think in different ways. So there's a very colorful spreadsheet on the one hand, and then there is a memo type document, a Word document that has a lot of text. And so they basically represent the same information. I'm going to loosely be working my way through the textual document, but I think folks should feel free to refer to either, whichever works. I guess I'll just briefly kind of orient to the spreadsheet as a tool as we go through. So at the top of the spreadsheet, the first couple lines represent all of the, you can't really call them revenues, so I'm calling them sources, all of the inputs into the capital bill, dollars available for appropriation, for allocation. And then the bottom section represent all the uses, so all of the expenditures. And again, this just shows items where there was a significant change, where there was any change from the governor's recommend. So starting with the sources, now I'm personally sort of shifting back over to the text. As this committee remembers, really there's just, there's a finite amount of money in the capital bill, right? I don't need to tell you guys that. And within the bonded dollar construct, there's sort of a limited number of things that the committee can draw on. The governor's recommend presented based on all of the bonding capacity available at the time, plus some reallocations we found for prior year appropriations that hadn't moved forward or had left over. There's the bond premium, which when we go out to issue bonds, is another source that generates additional bonding capacity. And then this committee will remember when we presented the governor's recommend, we left $640,000 of possible bond authority on the bottom line. So we did not actually appropriate the full amount. So that was available to your House counterparts, plus $127 that they discovered in additional reallocations beyond what was included in the governor's recommend. That, as this committee knows, is not uncommon. I think it's worth noting that of that 396, 378 is actually from one single appropriation. That was an FY22 appropriation for demolition of the Windsor Correctional Facility. So actually what the House has done is reallocate that amount and then basically reappropriate it in current capital bill for the same purpose or for a very similar purpose expansion. So I'll get to that. So really, in terms of your traditional pot of other reallocations, they found about $17,000 of additional reallocations, which I think I mentioned before is not unexpected this year, since we did go through this last minute exercise and came up with that 640,000. That was on the bottom line. So that all combined means that the House had an additional $1 million, $1,036,128 to work with beyond income for everyone. And that is reflected now. It's moving down in the sheet to the next section. This is the breakdown of what they did to get to that 1,036,000. So the first category are cuts to GovRec appropriations. These are just straight up reductions to what the governor had proposed. So that first list there, 300,000 from the Middlesex master plan effort. That's the property that is slated for, I think, a short-term or youth facility. There's also been some talk of relocating. I think the Department of Public Safety needed some additional capacity. So it's a property that's been in flux for a long time. There was a plan to do some master planning and move forward. The House has reduced the governor's recommend by $300,000 there in FY25. In FY25 also, there's a reduction of $50,000 from the State House Historic Finishes appropriation. That's to replace carpets and other things. I think the curator could speak better to that. $250,000 reduction from an appropriation that was designed, that was meant to help with the phase out of certain refrigerants, which have been regulated, I believe, by the feds, the federal government. $100,000 from dam safety and hydrology projects, $550,000 from agriculture, food and markets, water quality grants. So of those, I would particularly stress, obviously, the administration is disappointed on a number of levels with some of the changes. I think, we are more disappointed in some places than others. And I will do my best to kind of flag those that we find particularly problematic.
Yeah, we wanna know.
Yeah.
We wanna know, what I'm gonna ask everybody is to be not partisan. Actually partisan, I want everybody to know where they're hurt. I wanna know why the reason that they're hurt. I want the community to know why it is, but maybe we might agree, maybe we might not agree. But the explanation might make a difference somewhere down the road. So as descriptive as you can get to why it bothers you, we want to know. We'll be asking everybody that comes in here that. So please don't be afraid. Yes.
And just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
if you can prioritize,
Right.
which are more important and in what order?
And I think we'd be happy to do that.
Great.
And I'll try to preliminarily address that today. And we can certainly be in touch to
I'm
follow.
gonna take one right off the list for you. That's pretty easy. The 550 that went to ag is gonna be back in no matter what. I've had to talk to the House chair about that. She has had the ag committee in, or the ag people in, Mr. Tebbets in, and that is gonna go back in one way or the other. We're gonna figure that out. This committee is pretty proud of what we've done for clean water in the state. And that is without a doubt, gonna be back in the mix of things. So
Great. Yeah, I think that, having watched that unfold in the House, I think that reduction was really the result of miscommunication and a timing issue.
and I let the Mr. Tebbets know that,
Great.
and I think that they resolved their differences, and I think they're back in love, so that's good.
Wow.
I was happy to,
Yeah.
So-
Happy as long as it's approved.
love you guys. So I would thank you, Mr. Chair, for that. I would say at a high level, there's really two things that are sort of top of mind, I think, for the administration. One is actually at the bottom of the sheet, ironically. I'll get there and spend some time on that, this reduction in the IIJA reserve, which has serious fiscal consequences. But one of the challenges with prioritizing, I think, in this space is that part of what is disappointing is in totality, how much was cut, particularly from the cash fund. I know that I'm a broken record on this and have been in this chair before speaking extensively about this. We see really any reduction to the cash fund as problematic in the long run because we see that to be the state's most viable way to maintain capital capacity, honestly, moving forward. And we're not anticipating the bonding recommendations will go back up, nor should they, given rating agency concerns. So any cash fund reduction we feel as particularly painful, especially in aggregate, $5.2 million is essentially cutting our cash fund recommendation in half. And I will comment, I mean, I think what I've heard over and over in your House counterparts committee room was that as they were going through and looking at a number of these projects like this, within this first list, there are good examples. The narrative shared repeatedly was, well, what's the timing and what's the cash flow situation? And I think Chair Emmons in particular is very attuned to where are these projects in terms of completion? Are they going to get the money out the door this year? And I think that's an important lens to look at, but from our perspective, delaying projects because they may or may not be in different phases of completion is problematic because we know that there is such a limited capacity coming down the pike. We have lots and lots of stuff on the capital Christmas list coming up that we're going to need to fund at some point. So anything that you kick down the road, so to speak, this year into a future capital bill cycle, there's just less and less money available, especially if the cash fund continues to be diminished. So
This is where I need you to be very upfront with us. As far as the 5.262 cash fund, where'd it go?
so that's
Okay.
if it works for
Yep.
you, Mr. Chair.
And the other thing, again, I apologize too, I don't mean to keep cutting you off, but another thing is, we've talked a lot about it, I'd like to kind of get the, the committee feel, we spent a lot of time together, so we get to know which ones, what's our pet peeves and what they like and what's, where it is, and I mean, this is our committee, and so I really strongly that everybody needs to have a say and everybody needs to be heard. We're gonna be very attuned to any type of monies that, is match money of any sort. So if anywhere that they are going up and when we can make any other type of money, if that's getting disappeared, we want to know about that. That would be a priority for us.
Great. Well, I will definitely be sure to highlight that as we go. So I mean, just to the chair's question about, so this first chunk of 1.25 million in cuts, I'm very pleased to hear, I think we are all very pleased to hear that the ag water quality grants may be coming back in. Those are certainly really important and do leverage additional federal money. I think dam safety and hydrology is concerning, given what we all lived through this last year. Dam safety, I mean, honestly, it's hard. I'm trying my best to prioritize between all really valid projects. R22 refrigerants, I mean, I think my sense of the committee discussion was that they felt like that's an ongoing issue and will be ongoing for a really long time. I mean, to me, that's absolutely accurate. And for that reason, we should be putting money towards this project. I'd add that in addition to R22, and I think folks from BGS could speak to this, there is another class of refrigerants that has recently been regulated by the federal government and will need to be addressed too. So this body of work is growing. I think the master planning effort for Middlesex is particularly is also important. I guess, I would defer to the folks that spend more time in the State House on the importance of the State House historic finishes, but roughly in that order, I would put our prioritization. So there were 1.25 million in GovRec appropriations cuts. There are 2.286,128 in appropriations added that represent, I think, for the most part, House Committee on Corrections and Institutions priorities. Or I should say, actually, of that amount, 1.215130 are appropriations that were cash fund appropriations. The governors recommend that the committee moved into the bonded section. I think, frankly, the outcome that the House was driving towards was wanting to free up as much cash fund as possible. So when they identified cuts to the governor's recommended bonded authority, there was often a movement then of a certain amount of cash fund appropriations to backfill so that the net reduction would be in cash fund, if that makes sense, sort of an accounting function, but because to cut to the chase, Mr. Chair, in answer to your question, I mean, what happened with the 5.2 in cash fund reductions is that amount of money reduced the transfer and went to funding the House operating budget construct. So that's where that went eventually. But so 1.2 million are of the 2.2 in additions represent those movements from GovRec cash fund appropriations to bonded dollars. And then there's about $1 million of new HCI additions. That's those square bullets below. They increased the BGS major maintenance by $217,000. They added $75,000 for the Art and State Buildings Program in FY25, $478 for Windsor Correctional Facility demolition to salvage and dismantling. That's that reallocation I mentioned at the outset, plus a little bit.
So is that 478, 180, can that take the same function as the 550 that was cut from the Ag Water Clean Water Fund? They're both bonded dollars, so if this committee so chose, and I'm just trying to, and no decisions made, the chair's not making any decisions. I just want to put talking points out there as far as when I think I can identify some monies. That $478,180 that's meant for to start demolishing buildings, can that monies be put into the $550,000 so that we're that much closer as far as to getting those dollars back in that ag fund?
I think it's accurate to say, Mr. Chair, that those are in the same category, in the capital bill, correct? Those are both bonded dollar appropriations. There's $200,000 added for a feasibility study for a male re-entry facility at the currently women's correctional facility.
And so on that right there, aren't we a long ways from that? I mean, isn't it quite likely, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but isn't it quite likely that by the time that we finally get there, there's gonna be another study before another study before another study? I mean, isn't that, in my opinion, burning up $200,000, that by the time we get there, that all kinds of different climate cycles have been, as far as financial climate cycles have been already been through, and we're quite likely that whatever knowledge that we find with that $200,000 isn't gonna be accurate to even be used?
I think, Mr. Chair, yeah, that you preempted the one caution I was going to give on that. I mean, it's hard, right? This is the job of this committee to prioritize between important things. I think realistically, we are still a ways out, as you said, from the even citing about, I shouldn't say we're a ways out from citing. We're in the process of citing. We're a ways out from having a functional new women's correctional facility.
Remind us, are we within 5 years of that?
I would ultimately defer to my colleagues at BGS and TOC. I think once.
It really depends on funding.
Excuse me?
It depends on funding. That is really what's driving the timeline.
Okay, but on a case by, just right now, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kate Everly, Department of Buildings and General Services.
So, I mean, if we were to say right now, oh, here we go, we're gonna build that women's, what's the best case that we're gonna have that facility running?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I really should not answer that question on the record. I'm not gonna spitball on that, but it would take a while, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
So Nick, are we gonna prioritize these 5 as well?
I mean, since these are House priorities, Senator, I might not prioritize them. I would comment that the Windsor Correctional Facility, the chair, I think, has already expressed some opinions about the utility of that. I think that the administration has nothing to contradict those opinions. The 200,000 for the feasibility study, like I was in the process of saying, yeah, I think we're a long ways out.
Okay.
And we have a concern that if it were to be appropriated now, and a feasibility study was completed, that it might be stale by the time it's weird, so it might be a double appropriation. I think this committee has done good work on the Salisbury Fitch Hatchery. I won't.
Well, I am gonna add to that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we wrote a good bill. I think we all had a say in that. And we'll get people in on that, but the way that I saw it, that we already had built into that bill, we already had 3 years in a row, we had them coming back to us, telling us already what they could do, what they could do, what they could do. And I don't know that we could spend another $100,000 to do that, but I think we already have that covered. So I'm not, again, we're a long ways from discussing that. We'll have some folks in on that and we'll see about how successful that study will be. But that's my thought process. And again, you know me, guys. Anybody thinks any different, throw it out there. So just trying to make sure that we can put things out there for discussion.
Yep.
So
if the committee's okay with it, I'll move down next to the cash fund appropriation section, which I think should basically bring us home here. So what happened in the cash fund, as I noted, is when there were reductions to the bond, to the governor's recommend in the bonded section, certain cash fund appropriations, or a portion of them, were moved over from cash fund to bonded. So there are 3 items that fall into that category, totaling, as I said above, 1.215 million. $100,000 was moved from appropriation for the Northwest State Correctional Facility booking expansion. That was a $600,000 cash fund appropriation. So what the House effectively did was cut 500 of it and moved 100 to bonded. There similarly was 559,000 in FY25 for statewide DOC HVAC upgrades, which was just about the same amount, got it here in the spreadsheet, 562,000 in the GovRec. They moved 559 to bonded, I think basically just to round the numbers out. So that's basically a wash. It's a slight decrease of 2.7. That's an important project, I think, to everybody involved in this process. So, and then the final item in that category was 555,850. Moved from a fish and wildlife cash fund appropriation back to bonded. That was an $800,000 appropriation. That's for general infrastructure projects, so things like the camps that they maintain, Buck Lake, different projects in their wild.
So that's the $250,000 or $250,000 you got taken out of Fish and Wildlife.
Exactly, yep, so there it is. And then, so those are all the transfers or partial transfers. And then there's a little over $4 million in straight reductions to the governor's cash fund recommendations. And quickly going through these, 500,000 that was going to 128 State Street for HVAC and steam line work. That's, I'd say, an important project that we're going to have to do at some time. So that falls pretty squarely in the category of we are concerned about kicking the can on that. Likewise, $600,000 for the Northern State Correctional Facility boiler replacement and $500,000 for the Northwest State Correctional Facility booking expansion. Only $100,000 of which was moved to bonded above. I think this committee may be hearing directly from AHS in the form of a letter or memo on some of the DOC cuts. I think they're concerned. There's a lot of work to do in that department. They are will be doing their best to kind of clarify what the ramifications of those funding cuts will be. 250,000 was cut in FY24 from DCF's short-term secure stabilization facility, largely I think because there's been a move in the model for that. We've moved from a outright construction and state ownership to a build to lease model to the developer. So there are some cost savings associated with that, but it is but there are not as much as we might like, right? So that's still expensive. $150,000. There's $350,000 items down in a row. One was for the Washington County Courthouse renovations. The next is for DPS Special Teams Facility and Storage. $150,000 for the Rutland Field Station for the Department of Public Safety. Again, all of which I think we view as important projects. $244,000, 150. This is the reduction of the fish and wildlife infrastructure projects we were just talking about. Certainly concerned there. Concerned, I would say too, I think this is important to mention in the context of all the discussions that have happened about the fish hatchery this year. Fish and wildlife has a limited budget. That's where the proposal for the fish hatchery closure came from. And These are not necessarily directly earmarked for hatchery improvements, but I think it's fair to say that to the degree any reduction in their capital budget necessitates reprioritization. I mean, there can be trickle down impacts across the department, right? So it feels sort of cutting cross purposes to cut that significantly. There's $1 million that was cut for the Vermont State Colleges appropriation in FY '24. That was a $7.5 million appropriation. That's now down to 6.5. This is one I think we all feel relatively sanguine about. I hope, including the Vermont State Colleges, who came in and testified that this was contemplated to help with the construction of, I think, 2 buildings. Now, I'm forgetting which one is on which campus.
Vale.
All in Vale. And I understand that in their master planning efforts, they decided not to move forward with the construction on one of them. So I hope that would be a relatively painless.
So that $1 million doesn't seem to cause much heartburn. I mean, to some people it will, but
I wouldn't want to speak for the state colleges, but for me personally, I haven't been on like this. Right, but
The 6.5 though is still in the budget.
right, correct. So that $7.5 million appropriation, as I understand it, included what would have normally been their annual kind of major maintenance
Yeah,
budget
okay.
plus some additional amounts for
Yeah.
these 2 projects. $500,000 was cut for the Newport courthouse replacement. There was some extensive discussion of that, I think, in the House. And again, I think that ultimately boiled down to a perception about timing and that project moving forward.
yeah, we have a lot of work to do up there still, so even though it's in my district, I'm not heartburned over that.
And then, as I said, a very nominal cut to the DOC HVAC just in terms of the transfer. So I guess I'll pause there in case the committee has any questions specifically on any of those appropriations before I get the last kind of major money piece, which was the reserve, but anything to clarify on the section above?
I think so.
Well, just generally, if you want cash to be, if you want more cash in the cash fund after this process is over, you should be in favor of cuts to the cash fund appropriations. Just generally.
I would say, Senator, so the way that things have shaken out in the House, so we proposed 11 point something million in cash fund appropriations, backed up by a $10 million transfer to the cash fund. So the House Corrections and Institutions Committee has reduced the amount of appropriations, but they haven't left that transfer.
So they reduced the
They
transfer
reduced
also.
the transfer.
Okay, so that's
And that's how
part of this.
that's how it flows back into the House operating budget. By reducing that transfer, that frees up that $5 million for the House to use for other.
Okay, so that's really.
So what we're advocating for, just to clarify, is a I mean, it's the hard thing. How do you prioritize this pressing need over this pressing? I mean, I think the administration views the cash fund transfer as really important, given it being I hate to use superlatives, but like highest and best use, right? And from a fiscal standpoint, I think it's really easy to argue that these are long-term investments and that the expansion of the capital bill relative to other things serves the state well in the long run. I mean, I've had conversations with the treasurer's office, and this committee may be hearing more in future weeks. The concern is, as I've said before, that the rating agencies are really starting to look at deferred maintenance as a metric of a liability for a state. And so any dollar that we don't spend keeping on top of our capital projects, there is a possibility of however many years that could come back to have real fiscal ramifications for the state.
What's left, is 9.5, what's left in the cash fund?
So based on the House construct, they are, like I said, reducing the governor's recommended transfer and accordingly reducing the appropriations. So
So do we have 9.5 million left in the cash fund when it's all said and done, or no?
where, Mr. Chair, you can.
Well, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that we had over here, on the big spreadsheet over here.
So, yeah, I believe, and I'm just going from memory here, I think that 955 is the amount of appropriations that total in, I think it's FY 25 that the House is leaving. And if I, oh, it's the same thing.
Good, so that's it on the bottom line, that's basically seed money to keep, correct me if I'm wrong with my wording here, I don't want give my committee down the wrong path. So that's seed money basically to keep the cash fund.
So that's not, at the end of, if the House, capital budget were to pass as it's currently configured tomorrow, that's not left on the bottom line, that just represents the total of what they are spending.
Okay,
FY 25, so they are I think their intention is to zero out the cash fund.
okay,
In that cash fund A, I should be specific, and we're gonna shift to cash fund B in a second.
okay,
And I'll just point out in case anybody's confused, so. Reduction, I've been talking about a reduction of about 5.2, 5 million, yeah, 5.262 million. And some committee members might be saying, well, the governor's recommend was 11.5, and they're down to 9.5. They also, I would point out, made some reductions in FY 24, so that's what you have to look at. We were proposing 39.4 in FY 24, they were proposing 36.2, so you add both fiscal years together, and that's the total cash flow.
Yeah, but if you look at this by itself, it doesn't tell the whole picture. The picture is the 10 million. That's, well, what I'm saying, like the house, when you have your deltas, that's the amount of cash that is no longer going into projects according to the house's budget.
Right, so this,
But the problem is, like that on its own would be a good thing if you represent an agency or an individual or office that wants to have more cash. Spending less cash would be better.
so thanks for the clarification, I think that's an important point to untangle. We are for spending cash, and we.
I thought you wanted to save with the
That's next, that's in the case of counts, but.
yeah, but I
we're
wouldn't
for-
count that as spending right now. It's cash flow.
So setting aside that just for a second.
Yeah.
We are advocating to use the cash fund to augment the capital bill. So these reductions to the cash fund constitute a lessening of the cash fund as a tool to fund capital projects, right? And instead, as I think you're pointing out, those $5 million have been reallocated elsewhere in the House's budget. to other-
Yeah, well, this is like, not knowing what happened to those funds. I had thought that that the governor's office wanted to save the cash in a designated fund for other projects.
That's what.
But for other projects in the future, not other projects
the B.
now.
That's kept in cash fund B, and
Right.
yes, we do. This was cash fund A, which was always designed to be an annually funded cash fund use. I mean, yeah, in an ideal world, it would have been great to leave certain amounts on the bottom line in the cash fund. That's not what's
Yeah.
happening in the House construct, and maybe grow the fund balance. I think that that's pretty unrealistic.
Have we given up on that?
Well, I think it's frankly a challenging proposition, given the pressing needs that we always have every year, right? I
We
mean,
could try.
This building,
We
yeah.
want
Right.
a little-
We're trying.
If you senator would like to put more cash into the cash fund as a reserve for future match, I don't think you'll get any pushback from the administration.
What I would like to have a longer, I would like to have something that went out more years. That showed us the impact of our choices.
So I think we'd be happy to provide that sense.
I think I'm understanding, using cash, the fund A lessens the necessity to bond. In some
Right,
fact.
that's why it would be good to have cash, like every year, it would be really good to have a quantity of cash that was the same for each year. But you can only do that after saving it, that's what some municipalities do,
So,
but we're not really talking about that, we're just like, we have these pots of money and we wanna put them in different places and they'll likely be spent in 3 or 4 years.
so if I might, Senator, our proposal to do exactly what you're describing, to have a certain amount of cash available
Yeah.
every year, is that 4% annual
Right.
transfer.
Right, that's,
For general-
yeah, but that's
Right.
good,
That's
but it,
specifically tied to
Yeah.
growth in general fund appropriations, so that we are never sort of stepping out of our means in a given fiscal year.
Yeah.
And generally appropriating what we have, so
Yeah.
that was it, but I think since it's come up and it's really sort of the last major thing I wanted to touch on, if it's okay, I'll jump to this, IIJA reserve.
please,
So to refresh the committee's memory, last year. A lot happened in the cash fund. One thing was that there were in the final construct, there were two sub-accounts established. Everything we've been discussing today is cash fund A. Cash fund B, titled technically the other essential investments and reserves account, I believe. I may be missing a word in there. Had kind of a broader statutory eligible uses, one of them being it could be a holding tank, if you will, for reserves for future years. So we put, or this legislative body put $25 million in there for AOT match. There's two buckets. One for AOT, $25 million for future year IIJA match. That match need materialized in this fiscal year, so it was unreserved in the governor's recommended budget and used by AOT for the purpose it was intended. And then there was another bucket of $14.5 million set aside for ANR IIJA match in states fiscal years FY26 and FY27. And this where it gets confusing is there was also a $9.8 million appropriation in Act 69 in the capital bill for the FY24 and FY25 IIJA match for ANR. So they are very gratefully and happily using that to leverage, in that case, like a 10-to-1 federal drawdown. This funding, the way IIJA is structured, IIJA, by the way, just to contextualize all this, has the potential to send about $166 million to Vermont over the course of these fiscal years we're discussing, which is big money, right? It's unfortunately the total estimate of the need in that space, that what we really need to achieve all of our clean water objectives in the state is more like $2 billion. So 166 million, 2 billion. So it's a lot of money, but it's also not a lot of money. In order to leverage that full 166 million, we need every penny of these match dollars that we set aside. So we appropriated, because it was coming up in a biennial capital bill, 9.8 million in FY24 and FY25, and we set aside 14.5 million for FY26 and FY27. That 14.5 million, the way IIJA is structured, those dollars will leverage at minimum about 5 federal dollars to every 1 state dollar. And if they go to certain designated priority areas, like environmental justice focused municipalities or districts or areas, the match rate can be as high as 1 to 10. So it's a really good return on your state investment. What the House has done, in addition to the reduction to the cash fund transfer for A, is they have unreserved 5 million of that 14.5, and they're transferring it back to the general fund to be used in the operating budget for other things.
Okay.
So that $5 million now becomes $5 million instead of $5 million that could draw down at least $25 million.
Okay. Well, how do we get that back?
So
That's what we will be concerned about.
I think, Mr. Chair, this, like several other items here, the capital budget and the appropriations, the regular operating budget have become enmeshed to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I anticipate your colleagues across the hall will be doing a lot of work to take in the totality, not just, by the way, as everybody in this room is aware of, not just the House passed budget, but the other significant spending bills that are out there. There's 3 or 4 of them totaling about $140 million. So I don't have a good silver bullet answer, but I guess my hope would be that in the shuffling and the reconsideration and combinations, perhaps reprioritization, this 5 million, which again, compared to $140 million in these additional spending bills, could leverage 25 million in additional federal dollars. So I would implore, or I hope that this committee may have some success to agree advocating specifically for that that bucket and trying to figure out ways to juggle and reprioritize, because that's a really big potential loss if we're not setting aside that match. So that's what I would say is one of the administration's highest loss of concern.
So Nick, that 5 million, is that? I know it's getting transferred to the general fund, but is it earmarked specifically for a program within the general fund, or is it just
Like
sort
a
of
bunch of stuff.
slashed over?
I think unfortunately, Senator, the way that it works is it just goes into the pot and is what's used generally. I hear my commissioner,
No, it's just budgeting.
Okay.
so it's,
That just doesn't make good sense to me when you did that, and I mean, that is again. Cash fund is like dropping two goldfish in the middle of a piranha pen, I get that. That's just what it is, and but when you have that money specifically set aside. And I know this committee's talked about it quite a bit of time, and we're very proud of a lot of things, and one of them was the amount of monies that we did last year to leverage federal funds, and it just doesn't make much sense to me to be taking monies when you can get it's like, it's like taking monies that your employer wants to match your 401k with, and tell your employers, "Nah, I don't want that money. I don't want it. Nah, keep it. You need it more."
so, sorry, Senator.
No, that's all right, all right. So just a couple things. Did you say 25 million went to AOT of that?
So there
I
was
don't
a
see it.
separate reserve
Yeah.
that's not mentioned here of 25 million for AOT for also IIJA projects. And that was, the difference between AOT and ANR was that this year AOT actually had need of that 5 million, so we unreserved it and have it appropriate.
So they leverage some additional
And
monies.
it's leveraging federal dollars, yeah.
And was that for that project with one of the buildings or their facilities? Was that the facility that was for a garage?
I don't know
I
for
think-
sure, but I don't believe.
I know
it
there
a
was
single
something like
project.
that.
I mean, it's a huge sum of money, and my understanding is it helped leverage across a number of different.
I would say that being in transportation with that type of money, it was probably. Well, it would leverage so much money. I mean,
Alright,
when you get an 80-20 match and all that stuff, I mean. It would be so many things. I would say, Senator Harrison, that it probably went to bridge products, construction projects, because. A lot of those federal dollars is that you have a 20% match and they pay 80%.
Oh, no, I
So
understand.
I would say that again, a lot like with what the House did, without getting match money, they just took the 5 million and just threw it in the middle of the bucket. I bet that whatever dollars that they took, leveraged. What it was.
Okay,
I guess
well,
let me
at some
say it this
point,
way.
I would like to know what it is,
It
but I don't
was,
need to know.
well, I don't know if we need to know that, but, I can tell you this.
Alright.
It was used for the intent of what it was. It was used, that money was set aside to leverage, federal dollars. Where they could get 80-20 or whatever it is. But
Okay, and it was in our budget? It was in the
no,
capital
no,
budget?
it was in there. It was it was
So
transportation
that is
money.
money that was taken out of
It was transportation money that was parked in this sub-account B. And they used it specifically for what it was parked there for.
Alright, so that's part of the,
Right. Where the other $5 million that's getting taken out of here isn't being used for match money, it's just being taken out of here, and it's not leveraging any additional dollars. As Nick said, they're taking $5 million to spend $5 million, where if we were to spend that $5 million, it could be 10 to 1.
okay, I understand. So, and that actually did occur, the AOT expenditure that has happened?
Correct.
Okay,
Or is it anticipated to occur
but it's encumbered or some way, it's obligated,
on the docket?
so that's almost
I
obligated.
mean,
I guess it doesn't, I mean,
I would say it falls into the same category as anything else that's in the FY 25 operating budget.
okay, so not quite obligated.
I think want to defer to.
I think it's not obligated until we pass it, but whatever.
I think they have a set schedule of projects that they will.
Oh, yeah.
They will, so this is going to be put towards those.
Okay.
In fiscal 25.
Okay, so then the other question I have, and this is not directly related, but it's just about general other sources of revenue, but the, you know how the dams, the hydroelectric dams are being relicensed on the Connecticut, and it's the, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC license, and their 30-year license. And there's a lot of funding that is potentially available to at least to municipalities, and the state does have a role in that. It's not happened yet. But that, especially clean water and pollution purposes, that should be in someone, I hope, is looking at that, because it,
I am sure that the folks at DEC would have a beat on that. The natural resources generally.
Hopefully.
I know just enough
Yeah.
about dams to be really dangerous here, so I don't wanna say anything out of school, but I mean, my understanding, right, Connecticut River being owned by New Hampshire, I think that they do. I think that the
well, it's both of them in this case, because the impacts are on both sides of the river, and the Fellows Falls Dam is, in Vermont. But, and DEC would definitely know about the regulatory, like the fish things. But there's also projects that can be financed, so I just wanna make sure that you, many people have that on
Yeah, if it's not already. on
Radar.
I think it is.
We'll follow up with Ann.
Yeah, it just reminded me
Public safety.
some of these projects could be eligible.
Thank you. So I guess the last comment I would just make, I think for on this section, just to kind of contextualize, because I know we could be talking about these big sums of money. These are for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. That fund funds all kinds of projects, right, in local municipalities. I think there's been pretty extensive discussion in this committee specifically about the importance of those things. The complex funding stacks that get lined up, I included it just because I got this info from A&R and I thought it was pretty telling. The anticipated needs are estimated to exceed 2 billion. I mentioned that, but just the current demand in FY 24 based on 180 something applications, complete viable applications they've received, totals a little over $380 million, which, as I mentioned, over the course of IIJA, they're making $160 million available to us. But so the demand that we have to date through FY 24 exceeds the total available if we're fully drawing down federal funds by $200 million, right? So talking about an oversubscribed program and a ton of need out there. But I think that just, really underlines the importance. I'll leave it there on the IIJ reserve. The only other thing that was on there's the House introduced a number of new language sections into the bill. I think Spooky was walking through those with Damien last week. Some of them are the governor's recommended language. Some of them are new House items that we have no particular strong feelings about. One that I would flag that I think is of some concern to us, and certainly I think the chair commented this is a complicated issue, is the issue of naming state buildings. And there's a new committee established within the executive branch to look at that. I think Commissioner of BGS has spoken pretty eloquently on this. We are strapped, honestly, as an executive branch. Every department has seen significant increases in workload and demands put on them in recent years. This, regardless of the political context of the conversation, just constitutes an additional thing that state employees are going to have to do on top of their regularly scheduled duties. And since it's if it passes through the bill and becomes a legislative priority, it will be a zero-sum detractor from our capacity to do other things. So that was one in particular, I think. And I think we'd be happy to come back and walk.
So they're just trying to get it out of the legislative's hands as far as make it a agency, administration responsibility.
That's my understanding of the House's intent, right? They didn't want to retain authority.
Well, because it's a political football and they don't want to handle
I would refer to your House.
it.
So how are they handled currently?
They want to slough it on to somebody else.
No, but how,
They want the administration.
the House as a whole or the House committee?
The corrections, our counterpart committee is
Okay.
trying to make another committee. That the administration would be responsible for, of setting up a program to name state buildings.
And who names state buildings now?
It has been done through these committees when it's all said and done.
institutions.
Through
Okay.
institutions.
Okay.
So. Yes,
So can you remind me here, last year, how much of the IIJA match, phrase this correctly, did we forego by not reserving like as much as we could have, 100%? I think you know where I'm trying. We spent some of it, as the chair pointed out, and that's a pretty good analogy, of your employer's 401k. Nah, I don't need that. I just want cash to buy a new Corvette with, bright red trim. To me, it's not that simple, but. So how much of it could we have had that we didn't choose to do, I guess?
So last year, Senator, I don't have the numbers immediately in front of me, but I think they should be in your booklet. Or if not, the current capital budget adjustment proposal. The governor's proposed capital biennial budget last year had a higher cash fund amount than passed this legislative body finally. So some of that delta may account for what you're talking about. I happen that my portfolio includes ANR, so I know them a little bit better. I mean, I would just reiterate, $166 million is available. I believe we have the governor's construct of reserves, I believe, fully leverages that.
right.
But if we start
That's what I
cutting
remember too.
if we start cutting $5 million from it.
Right.
The
Well,
longer.
we did that last year. May not ended up the exact way that we wanted, but appropriations made that decision when they set up both funds. Sub-account B was, as Nick had said, in my recollection, was that was all the dollars that we could get at that time, and that was the cash needed to leverage all of those dollars.
So we didn't buy the Corvette last year, just to be clear.
Well, it might not have been a Corvette.
No, but we did leverage all of the dollars.
But-
That's my
but-
understanding
But this is what I
last year.
really
in
want you to be laser
actuality.
focused on.
I know.
No, not last year. We put the monies in there to go all the way through the IIJA, for all the way to the end of 28. So these amounts of dollars, that was $14.5 million that they've taken $5 million from, would have got us through the end, or pretty close to the end of 2028 of IIJA funds. But now they've taken
That's-
$5 million out of that, so next year to leverage these dollars, we're gonna have to find $5 million where we already have the money sitting in there. And the reason why the appropriations wanted that fund is because they basically wanted to put a fence around that money.
Yep.
Because the language was that it's just foolishness not to save that money, because last year, when we were setting this up, even then, the House did not want to set that money up, they wanted to spend the money last year. And that's why they set these sub-accounts up, so they would be funds that would be untouchable. So that when we wanted to draw down those dollars, that we had them at.
I understand, but I think Senator Palmer's question, and in case people are watching this, is I believe that we haven't missed out on any federal dollars to date. The issue is that we may miss out on future dollars if we don't plan well and keep that money
We're
separate.
gonna miss out on at least. Right, yes,
But I just wanna make sure that that
right,
is.
but
accurate.
now we don't have $5 million to leverage dollars that are gonna give us. 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 or whatever, so
Yeah.
now with next year's budget already, we're gonna have to find, before we start out with anything, when we have the money now. Already to leverage that money, next year, if we start out at zero, we have to come up with $5 million to get back to where we are right
Yes.
now.
Yes, that I agree with.
If I might, Senator, I mean, I think it's as always, a complicated question to answer fully and precisely. Within the context of this ANR reserve, I think your statement is correct.
Okay.
There are other items in the capital bill that leverage federal dollars. For instance, the $550,000 for ag water quality, the Anson and his team were in.
Yeah.
Last week testifying to the fact that even that amount, if restored, represents a massive undershoot of the available federal funding through a different acronym, federal acronym, with the Inflation Reduction Act, excuse me, is allocating a lot of money towards the agricultural sector.
Oh.
And we are not even putting up the full available state match to draw that down. So
I would love to hear about that.
I would I think Sherry Hansen and his team would be
We're gonna-
more than happy to come in.
Okay, good.
So there are, I would just say generally, other areas in which we're not necessarily pulling down every single federal dollar.
Okay.
Which is, again, apologies for the repetition here. One of the reasons we're feeling so strongly about this cash fund is just try to be a pressure release valve off some of these capital dollars so that we can allocate as much as we can to get our best bang for our buck. So,
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
sure. So that kind of concludes the major highlights that I wanted to cover. I'm happy to answer any other questions if the committee has them, or come back in the future if there's.
Oh, you're gonna be back here.
Yeah.
Don't go on vacation.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're gonna be back here.
I'm
We
taking
got,
off the eclipse day.
we got enough to.
Well, we are too.
Right.
For a little bit. Commissioner, anything you wanna add?
I'm here just in case you wanted to yell at someone, you're welcome to yell at me, but I don't, I think they covered it. Good. I would emphasize though, that this cash fund is something we really are, something that's very important to us, and I think it should be important, you guys. At the end of the day, if we get it right, we'll be saving the state. That's all. And I know we've made that comment ad nauseum to this committee, I think we're preaching to the choir, but I just wanted to reiterate that we were not very happy that there would be some contribution.
So one last question between the both of you. So with what we see right here, how much of the cash fund has been taken and used for other, it looks to me, my simple math, it looks to be over $10 million of cash fund that's been taken out of these funds and using for other things.
So
The 5.2 and the 5 million. So the 5.2 taken out of
So between the two cash fund sub accounts, there's 5.2 out of cash fund A
right.
and then 5 million out of cash.
Okay, so 10.2 million.
But 5 of that was to the AOC.
No,
Well, that's a separate.
that's a separate account. You're confusing the two.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, so
They use.
maybe you can write that
So,
up too.
so basically they used whatever they had in there in that sub account that was holding their monies, they used it to leverage their match. A lot like what we're gonna do as we go. So they had the opportunity to leverage their match, so that's why their money disappeared. It didn't get used for anything nefarious, other than what it was intended to park that account for, was to match to match other federal funds.
Okay.
So yeah, in full transparency, Senator, I mean, my intention with this document was to highlight differences between the House construct and the governor's recommend.
Mm-hmm.
The use of the $25 million for AOT, that was part of the governor's recommended budget. And since it was used for the purposes that reserve, as the chair was saying, that it was used for the intended uses, we don't have any. We stand by that decision. It's the
Okay.
reallocation of the 5 million from the ANR match to other purposes that don't draw down federal dollars that it is giving us concern.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Well, good, anything else?
Nothing for me, Mr. Chair. Thanks as always to the committee for their time. Really
No,
appreciate
thank you
it.
both. Appreciate you.
Great, so, thank you.
We'll have you back.
I'll be
No
back.
problem.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes.
Good luck, everybody in the snowstorm tomorrow.
Oh, yeah,
You
too. You
I
too.
left my boots down. I was bummed.
Thank
They
you.
were sitting here the whole time. Come on.
Might take your snow tires off early.
Right, oh, I did that too.
Okay. So we got a pretty high overview of that. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
I am not ready to have the chair of houses. I'm not ready to have the chair come in here from the house institutions yet. I don't know about you folks. I think we got a lot more wrangling to do here as far as trying to figure out where they're at, how they're at. I mean, I don't wanna get confused just yet about why they did or what they did. And how they did. I wanna keep on going through some of this stuff and discovering and get down to understanding this whole bill, what they, I just think it's too early for her to come in and tell what she did, unless you guys feel differently.
No, and I think the other point I'll make, we don't know that this is the final product anyway.
Right.
It could get changed on the floor today with an amendment or
Right.
something, so I'd like to wait until it's absolutely finished. And then have Representative Evans come in, because
Right. So is it fair to say, maybe we should write this down, would somebody do that, right? Would it be fair to say in this committee right now that we're committed to restoring the 550,000 to the A and R? And we'll have them in as well.
water quality.
Yeah, water
Yeah.
quality.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I wanna hear if there's other money that we're leaving on the table. I definitely wanna hear about that.
Well, I don't think there's any money left on the table.
Well, I mean, my impression is that there would be a larger federal match. That's what I thought I heard Nick say.
Okay, but those are two different questions, I think.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, there are two different questions.
The 550 is strictly for the hatchery.
No,
Oh, there's the other 550.
no, the
We have
five,
two
I apologize, yes, the 550, we don't have to, the 550 for the hatchery, we don't have to worry about, that's in the budget bill. They have that money, this 550 is just the clean water, the 550 they took from, ag is monies that was gonna leverage other clean water funds, a lot like what it is, so that's the 550 on that first section.
Section 10?
Yeah, well, or, let's look at the sheet right here, let's look at this one.
Okay.
Okay, so first line, bonded appropriations, HCI cut, 1.25 million. The last section, the last line on there, 550,000 in FY 25 from AAFM Water Quality Grant.
Yeah, which is right
Is
here.
that okay, yep.
Yep.
So. Okay, so. Here's my, yes, so here's my idea about how we can restore some of that dollars. If we go to the second line, and this will change a million times, but I just wanna make it simple. If we go to the second column, and that's on the same page, the HCI added 2.286 million. If we go down to $478,180 in FYI for Windsor, corrections, there's $478,180 there. And then if the committee does agree when it's all said and done, we have another $200,000 on the line below. And then to be fair, we have another 100,000 below that. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7. We have $778,000. We have 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6, 7. We have $778,180 right there, and those three lines right there that we can use 550,000 of that, and to restore that. To restore that 550. If we did that, that's going to leave us $228,000 left over to use someplace else.
Well,
If we got rid of those three lines, but
right above that, you've got 100,000 for the dams.
right, and so, and let's talk about that as well. And again, we're gonna go over this all over again, 100 million times. I don't know if, and you guys all heard the story again about the Green Water Reservoir. Did you hear about that? That the power company on the Green Mountain or Green River Reservoir, the power company wants to throw that up. They don't want that anymore. So we have pressures on dams all over the place. And so that Green River Reservoir is that's a dam that not Hardwick Electric, but it is Hardwick Electric, I think, manages that, and it's unprofitable for them. And they want the state to take that back. So my point being is, with all the pressures that we have on these dams, and we heard the presentation that we had up there as far as the Waterbury Dam, and we have all this need for monies. I don't know if we ought to be cutting any of the dam monies at all. So if you guys wanted to, we have $228,000 left up there on that line after we took those three lines out of there. We have $100,000 to restore
Yep.
the dam safety hydro. We have $100,000 to restore that back if you guys wanted to do that.
I would be in favor of that.
Well, but just going back, what my understanding where it has the same area where you took the money from the Windsor Correction Facility. I mean, I would like to know what they're talking about before we take all that.
I think what it was, I hear you,
but-
and she can tell us.
Yeah,
The
but
chair.
the BGS major maintenance, that 217,000, I think they just put that in. When they have extra money, they put it in major maintenance. So that can be, we
So-
could take the
And there's
2017 out of.
And what I would say, Senator Harrison, exactly. Those are all done. So as far as what you just identified, that's another $217,818 we can use somewhere else to try to restore
Yeah.
some of these cuts. So add that to the 778 that we all identified, and then, we have that, we have those dollars.
Are you saying we don't need the hatchery feasibility study?
I don't think
Because
we
have
do.
the
I think
550
we're
elsewhere?
Yeah, we have the 550 elsewhere, and all they were wanting to do, in that bill, they had to, 3 years in a row, they had to report back to us. They're gonna do it anyways, and they're gonna report back to us. And if they agree to that, they're willing to do it within their budget. The only thing that I would say is that they did get clipped down here, $244,000, $244,000, Fish and Wildlife. And, somewhere along the way, maybe we ought to find a way to restore that so that they can do with what our bill has asked them to do, to report back to us in those 3 successive years about what they plan to do. Are they gonna keep it open? Are they gonna move it to Ed Weed? Or what are they gonna do? So again, as Senator Harrison, you just did, you identified some more places that they just threw money in. Before it's all said and done, in a quick amount of time, we're gonna find better than $1 million to plug some of these other holes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to hear the reasons for the Windsor facility and, did the hatchery, did the,
So-
312 get passed by the other body?
Well, what? I wanted to just answer that question. Remember when they were saying as well, that I can find the dollars in here, there was another 378. Remember that when they were getting all the monies up top and they talked about what they did? Up this, on the top line, so this is the same thing that they did before. Alice just wants to start tearing buildings down at that facility. So $378,180,000 from an FY 22 appropriation for the demolition of the Windsor Correctional Facility. So that money's been sitting there since FY 22. So why did we want to take that $378,180? Then all of a sudden, we're gonna add that in the mix, but then we're gonna say, okay, here's another $478,180, which to do the same thing, what they've already repoed back. So how long will that money sit there? And what is the purpose of even tearing those buildings down? And when you have something, when you have an asset that at some point in time, you haven't determined what you're gonna do with it, the best thing to do to it is nothing. Because if you're gonna sell it, let somebody else assume the cost of building. Oh, we wanna tear those buildings down because somebody else might buy it. Well, they're gonna buy it regardless. They're gonna let them assume doing the work to it. I mean, they're gonna buy it for the asset of what it is, which isn't the buildings that are there. They're gonna buy it because there's how much land that there is, and that's what they're gonna do. So I'm not much into assuming of starting to tear things down because somebody else might want that. Or those are the buildings that are gonna get teared down. Or somebody said that those are the 2 buildings, if you're gonna tear buildings down, let's just tear them down. My thing is, if you don't know what you're gonna do with an asset, don't spend any money on it, just leave it there. And I just don't see in my own personal opinion, I don't see any reason why we gotta start tearing down buildings at that facility when they don't even know what they're gonna do with it. They don't have any idea, or they don't even have any idea whether they're gonna sell it, or who would buy it, or somebody said, we'd buy that if you tore those 2 buildings down. You don't know that, so don't make assumptions that you do. So that's kind of a long rant about why I don't think that we should start tearing buildings down there. Somebody might find those buildings valuable. You don't know that because you haven't even, there's not a plan to sell it. There's not a plan to fix it. There's not a plan to move in there. You have no idea what it is. So don't make assumptions when you don't know. That's kind of where it's at.
I totally agree with not making assumptions. Yeah, we just got, they're working on a plan, the plan for housing. So
Right.
it might,
So we don't know.
but the housing would be valuable to the
Right.
state.
So I don't believe that we ought to be even thinking about tearing any buildings down there. I think we have needs for that monies elsewhere within where we're at. And I think we go down through here, we've almost found $1 million. I bet we're gonna find a lot more than that.
The other thing I'll mention, if you add the two figures together, does it really cost $874,000 to tear a building down? Even if you only took some of that back.
Right.
If there's like a potential of toxic stuff and you wanna mitigate that. But I agree, it doesn't hurt to just leave the buildings up.
Right.
It's not,
They're already there.
Yeah,
You're gonna sell
I don't
it, try
know.
selling it with them on there.
That's right.
right, but it
That's right.
could
Have you
be,
tried that?
That's
I-
right, not, and they
I
haven't
don't-
made that decision yet, so yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I mean, just generally in economic development, it's good to sell with a clean slate, but I haven't seen those,
874.
no, the 800, that sounds like a lot. That's why I would just like to know more.
okay, and then, as we're just kind of a broad discussion here, which is what I really wanna do. I really wanna get the pulse of where you guys are thinking and feeling, going down through these sheets. Looking down through, cash fund appropriations, the last column, where they've got $5.2 million in cash that they're taking out. In my mind, I'd like to try to restore the $244,000 taken from Fish and Wildlife, because we are gonna ask them to do some things to report back to us, and I don't really see any reason. I just don't see any reason why to take it, but are there any other programs in there that you guys feel strongly about? That that we should, be looking at? And we'll get the people in to talk about it, but I just wanna get a, kind of an idea about,
Yeah, I don't know, and it's a little amount of money, 150 grand for the DPS Rutland Field Station. I don't know what that's for. They already have a site picked out and the land. Does that 150 get spent engineering designs, or I don't really understand what that is. So I'd like to find out why that needs to be there.
it sounds like all that stuff is BGS stuff, so.
It is.
So what do you guys think? Do you think the next people that we ought to get in there is to figure out, to get BGS in here?
Yeah,
And to start going down that list? If any of that makes sense?
It makes sense to me, and again, they made all these cuts with some bottom line in mind, right? I mean, I
Right.
don't think they were cutting willy-nilly, I think they probably saw they needed to cut 5.2 million, so then they found places to cut it.
I think in the point and in the minds of what they're trying to do in that. I think what they were trying to do is cabbage as much cash out of our bill as they could. So that's a lot of what they're doing. So they're saying, okay, we're gonna cut this because it was cash. We're gonna cut this because it was cash. Because at the end of the day, they end up taking $5.2 million out of it. So, hey, it's cash, let's just take it right now. And maybe those, maybe those projects are very, very important. And maybe at the end of the day, so this is how I want you to think about it. Maybe like where they took out of sub account B, they took the $5 million, it's gonna leverage, so many thousands, so many other millions of dollars. Maybe by them taking that $5.2 million now, maybe by putting these projects off, it's gonna cost $10 million by the time they get back to trying to do it, so. Let's probably get these guys in here and maybe find out, what's gonna happen if you don't do the HVAC steam lines, what's gonna happen if you don't do the boiler replacement?
Yeah.
And so, what's gonna happen if you don't do the booking expansion? So maybe we should have them then.
Yeah, and it might just be
Yeah.
a scheduling thing, it might be that
Exactly,
it won't be done till FY 26.
but it doesn't mean, here's what I really want you to think about, okay? It doesn't mean that we still have to give them that cash. This is our bill as well. Maybe we have need for it, maybe when it's all said and done, we see, okay, you guys are taking $5.2 million in cash, no, we don't wanna take that $5.2 million in cash. And we wanna put it back in some account B again, so we can put that $5 million in there to leverage the monies that we want to make that account whole again.
Right.
So those are the thoughts that I want you guys to have in your heads as far as all said and done. Especially when, that's just something that they decided to do. We might have some different ideas and we have every right to have that idea.
One thing I wanna mention, and I think I mentioned this to you maybe The other agricultural thing was the orchards. The orchards didn't get anything.
Okay.
From in compensation for the
So
bad
let's,
weather.
let's keep them on the list, let's work hard, we got a lot of work to do. Just telling you, we have a lot of fight to do, we just have a lot, guys, so we really do, and that's why. I'm gonna be resistant as far as to get somebody that's in there to start defending their position as far as what they did on that side of it, until we understand exactly how we feel about it. So that's why, you know, we're gonna have some pressures, they're gonna wanna come in here, and they're gonna wanna know what we're up to, and they're gonna, oh, and they're, you know, they wanna tell us what their thoughts are. When it's all said and done, I wanna know what your guys' thoughts are, because I think we're gonna change this bill. You know, not gonna be disruptive, but I think we're gonna change it the way that we wanna change it. I'm gonna have a conversation with Senator Kitchell as well, because I wanna be realistic as far as what changes that we make. And if she says, well, no, I'm gonna concur with the House appropriations for taking that monies. We can do all the work that we want to do.
There's a period at the end of that sentence.
Yeah, so I'll have a conversation with her, by tomorrow, and,
Yeah, that's important.
yeah. Cause we can do a lot of activities, we can
We don't wanna waste our
run 3 miles and not get a ribbon.
time.
That's for
It'd be good for us, but.
Yeah, you know, yeah,
That's true.
Okay,
I think that's a good plan.
okay. What else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Today.
You guys good?
Yeah.
You guys good?